Good evening, parents and carers, and any other community members that are joining us this evening. A huge welcome to our Lent 2 webinar series. I'm really proud to say that we have returning the Sleep Charity and Kerry Davies, who I'm going to introduce shortly. And it's really fantastic. We're building that relationship with another organisation who are becoming metaphorically part of the Forest family. But before I introduce our speaker this evening, just a reminder, our next webinar is Thursday, the 13th of March, and it's focused on raising resilient children. And it's with Alicia Drummond, founder of Wellbeing Hub. And again, she is another family member of the Forest community. So we're really excited to have her. We're not hoping no experience in any technical difficulties, but as always, please do bear with us. I just want to highlight another reason we're doing this webinar, of course, because the Sleep Charity and especially Kerry are fantastic and they're experts in what they do. But I think it would be remiss of us just not to highlight, especially in my role and representing the safeguarding team, that in our wellbeing survey, a theme of sleep has come up, and it's come up repeatedly in terms of pupils in the senior school struggling with sleep. And I know you and parents and carers will be doing lots at home to support with that and close the gap. But again, the point of these webinars is to join together, educate ourselves as parents and carers and educators and practitioners to really support the children in our care. So this is the reason why we are also doing this webinar this evening. And me and Kerry were just speaking before the commencement of this webinar that we will be inviting them back again to do another strand of sleep, because it's a massive umbrella. So about Kerry, she's a mum to 2 school-age children herself, and she knows exactly how vital a good night's sleep really is. She was offered a sleep practitioner's course through her employer back in 2011, and then her 2-year-old daughter's sleep problems, it was a lifeline at that time. And through that expert training, she said she solved her daughter's sleep problems and it changed everything. And she wanted to spread the sleep fixing magic around for other parents and carers and adults with sleep disorders. She is now a member of the British Sleep Society, the professional organisation for medical, scientific and healthcare workers dealing with sleep disorders. So a real expert in our presence this evening. And she's also completed 2 sleep schools certified by the British Medical Journal and training in cognitive behavioural therapy for insomnia in adults. And before that, she trained as a learning disability nurse and taught in a school for teenagers at risk of exclusion. Her roles within mental health, hospital settings, schools, and with families of children with SEND have given her a wealth of knowledge and experience, and that she can help any families. And we use a lot of the Sleep Charity resources for our personal development curriculum and our RSHE curriculum, and we're really hoping we can get the Sleep Charity in with pupils also to have that conversation and messaging face to face. So we really are in the presence online of an expert, and I'm really excited to welcome her back and the Sleep Charity back to our Forest Focus webinar series. And she ends with saying she makes complex sleep science accessible. So I'm going to be all ears this evening, but I think it's really important to know that the pupils at Forest are raising this as a concern, and there are a lot of schools that will touch upon it in a really surface response and kind of do, the traditional, well, make sure you go to bed early. And what Kerry's going to do is really dig deeper into that and do it the Forest way, where we're going to have much more nuanced response based on the kind of scientific evidence. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Kerry.
Hello, thank you for that lovely introduction. Thank you everybody for being here. And yeah, the introduction says it all really, but I'm really passionate about sleep. I'm really passionate about making sleep easy as well. So the stuff that I'll be talking about through this presentation will be things that you can actionable steps, because that is what's really important. And if we go on Google, it'll give you 100 different things that you can try and do, but a lot of it will be out of reach, will take a lot of time, and teenagers particularly might not actually want to do it. So we'll look at some myths as well around sleep and teen sleep in particular. So what do teens need to know about sleep. The charity as a whole is a very tiny charity that wins absolutely tons of awards. We're making real steps in, combating sleep on a national level, and all of the advice and presentations that we do is really rooted within sleep science and from an evidence-based background. We actively get involved in lots of research projects with different universities and hospitals, again, across the UK, and tirelessly campaign to raise awareness around sleep, and have launched 2 manifestos in the Houses of Parliament to try and get this on the government wellbeing agenda, because we know how much of an impact good sleep has on us in a real positive way. So we want to be sharing that information of how to get there. So what do teens need to know? And I guess as parents, what do you need to know? So around 50% of children are going to have difficulty with sleep at some point. Okay, so it's really common. 1 in 2 children are going to, and I'm guessing if you're here, your children, teens, have had an issue at some point. Around 80% of children with SEND are likely to have a sleep issue. And so you can see just how that raises, and that's as a whole umbrella term. And around 40% of the adult population are affected by sleep issues as well. So this is a real issue, a real problem in society. And so many people are struggling with this, and often struggling in silence or not knowing where to go. And I couldn't tell you the amount of times in a week that people will say to me, I didn't even realize there was such a thing as a sleep expert or a sleep coach, because it's not accessible in most areas. So sleep can be really difficult to measure in adolescence, because often teenagers are less likely to interrupt you. So you might not actually know exactly what's going on with their sleep, because they will kind of keep it to themselves. They also might not even see it as a difficulty. They might not even see it as a problem, because their peers are doing it, right? And if we've got 50% of people having difficulties with sleep, and they're talking to their friends and they're having the same difficulties, that might make them think, oh, this is normal, right? This is just what it's like for us. Sleep issues, however, can make them feel isolated. Now, teenagers aren't lazy. So this is something that's well publicized, that, we've got teenagers that are lazy, they don't want to get out of bed. But actually, during adolescence, there are scientific shifts that happen within the body, within the circadian rhythm, which I'm going to talk about, and melatonin production, which can hugely delay when melatonin is produced and released. So this can biologically happen in teenage years, and is really, really common. And both of my children have been through it, and all of a sudden they're not going to sleep until 11 o'clock at night, and you think, oh no, but obviously I do know how to deal with it, so I'm in a fortunate position. But you can have a child that's fallen to sleep at, say, 9 o'clock every night, and then all of a sudden that pings up until midnight, and you think, what have I done? Where have I gone wrong? And actually you haven't done anything wrong. This is a physiological issue that can occur in teenagers, and actually they believe it comes from cavemen times, when the youngest and fittest of the pack had to guard the cave in the early hours of the morning. And it's kind of something that evolution hasn't completely dismissed, and hasn't completely, just as a side note, hasn't completely got rid of. So it is really normal for teenagers to find it difficult to fall asleep, and it can then be very difficult for them to be able to wake up in the morning, because they ultimately aren't going to have had enough sleep if they're falling to sleep much later. Now, feedback, and we do lots of feedback, and within our teen hub as well, which I'll talk to you a little bit about at the end. And the feedback consistently will suggest that young people feel that they're misunderstood by adults, right? So of all adults, professionals, parents, everybody. And that's often because if a teen says, like, I can't get to sleep, think, well, you'll say, go to bed earlier. But actually, if you've had that physiological change happen, going to bed earlier isn't going to be helpful at all. You're going to spend just longer in bed, not being able to fall asleep, because you're physiologically not ready to. So having an understanding, and that's why it's great that you're all here, right? Because you've now got that understanding that you can really empathize, with your son or daughter. You can really empathize with them. you can't control sleep either. So like I said, going to bed early is rarely going to help with sleep. And I always use an example, my bedtime is quite early, about 9:30, 10 o'clock. So I wake up really early. But if somebody said to me, go to bed at 7 o'clock and have your sleep from then, there's no way I'd be able to fall asleep at 7 and sleep all the way through until, 4:33, because my body clock is set at that later time. And then if somebody said to me, go to sleep at 7 o'clock and I'm going to take everything away from you, you just have to lay in bed and be quiet for that time, the likeliness is that my anxiety is going to increase. I'm going to think about things, potentially think about problems, and all different things are going to come into my head, and I'll get myself into a right tiz and then not be able to fall asleep probably until much later. So it's really important, this kind of knowledge underpins where you go from here. Now, we know that sleep deprivation has a huge impact, on anybody who is sleep deprived, and in particular for teenagers when exams are coming up, and academic studies are happening. There's a lot of pressure to be able to achieve. And we know that sleep deprivation has a direct impact on being able to learn and being able to consolidate that learning as well. And I'll talk a little bit about the stages of sleep and why this is a thing right later on in the presentation. We know that concentration is more difficult when you haven't had enough sleep, and daytime behavior can change. Now, often people associate like not having enough sleep with being sleepy. People, they don't seem very sleepy, but actually it can have the opposite effect on particularly children and teenagers, where daytime behavior, you can become quite hyperactive, can be quite challenging and irritable. I'm irritable just after one poor night of sleep. So it can also impact on education in terms of attendance, right, and being late. Our immune system isn't replenished in the same way when we haven't had enough sleep. So we're more likely to get ill more frequently, or the illnesses can span longer in duration. So this can have a direct impact on attendance. And of course, if you can't get out of bed in the morning because you're really tired, this can then have an impact on being able to get to school on time. Weight, it has an impact on weight. And actually, when we haven't had enough sleep, what our body will do is it will crave like sugary foods, complex carbohydrates, all the foods that we want to be avoiding. The body will crave that because it's really clever. It's like, oh, I haven't got much energy, so I'm going to have this stuff because it's going to give me a boost. It's going to make me feel energized. And that, of course, can then have an impact on weight and increased risk of diabetes, all of that stuff that comes alongside putting weight on. Has a direct impact on our mental health as well. And we know that, children, teenagers, we're in this mental health crisis, and there's no doubt in my mind that sleep is feeding into that. And the ability, which I think is the most important one actually of all, the ability to be able to meet our full potential will reduce significantly when we haven't had enough sleep. And everybody deserves to be able to meet their full potential and what's best for them. We need it for our self-esteem, and how we feel about ourselves. So a couple of quotes here. So many students are unaware that academic difficulties are related to sleep habits. So this is conversations that you can be having, because often it's not spoken about very widely. So that link isn't made. Now, students who don't get an adequate amount of REM sleep, which is our dream sleep, and I'll talk more about the sleep stages in a moment, are likely to perform significantly worse recalling any new learning information than students who have slept well or had normal sleep or haven't missed any REM sleep cycles. Up to 60% of all college students suffer from poor sleep quality. I don't think there's been any research in younger, but it's going to be a similar number. And 7.7 meet all criteria of an insomnia disorder. So, it's a real thing. So the common issues that we see in teenagers is this biological change that happens. So when our sleep hormone melatonin, because of puberty and our hormones, gets released later. So we end up with this delayed sleep phase. So delayed sleep phase means that our melatonin is released later. Therefore, our sleep time is delayed, meaning we can't fall asleep until whatever time, early hours of the morning. Having a regular sleep schedules as well, particularly weekends, can be and school holidays as well. So if your young person is waking up at, say, 7 o'clock every morning, Monday to Friday, to be able to go into school, and then on a Saturday they're sleeping until 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday and Sunday, it's then going to be really hard to get back into the routine of being able to fall asleep. And I'll talk a little bit more about sleep pressure, which feeds into this. Inappropriate napping as well. So napping in the afternoon can be really common in adolescence. So when we nap in the afternoon, this can have a direct impact again on our sleep biology. The bedroom environment. So what is the bedroom environment used for? And often, particularly with teen bedrooms, my children included, there's TV in the room, gaming in the room. So the bedroom is used for a variety of different things, revision, speaking to friends, listening to music. All of that stuff can happen within a bedroom environment. And when it actually comes to bedtime, is that bedroom environment a sleep sanctuary? Does it feel inviting? Is it calm? Is it relaxing? And they're the things to kind of think about. Anxiety plays a huge role in sleep, and sleep deprivation, anxiety have got like a bi-directional relationship. So we know that high levels of anxiety impact on sleep, and then sleep deprivation impacts and exacerbates anxiety. So I always say to people, that I'm working with and supporting, having a bi-directional kind of approach to this. So not looking at sleep in isolation or anxiety in isolation, but actually looking at it together can be really helpful to come into some kind of, resolution for it. Peer pressure. So, other friends that stay up until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, why do you go to bed? And nobody goes to bed at 10 o'clock. Those kind of conversations that happen. Screen usage, particularly, I would say with this one, things like social media. So the blue light is kind of still waiting. There's people that say that blue light has a massive impact. There's scientists that say that it doesn't have any impact. But screen usage as a whole, we know that when we're on things like Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, it's so fast paced that the algorithms are so well designed that it keeps you hooked, it keeps you on there, which makes the brain ultimately very, very busy. And what we want is the brain to be nice and relaxed. So I'll talk a little bit more about screen usage and things and hacks that you can try with your teens to make this a bit easier, make that transition a bit easier. And then we have transitions themselves, right? So, it gets to 10 o'clock at night, you go, right, time to chill out now. I need to be going to bed. And then you get but I haven't done this, and I've forgotten to do my homework, and I need to do X, and I need it, because that transition of going to bed. And often bedtime and sleep time is seen as quite like a negative time of the day. I mean, you get to adulthood and it's not negative at all. It's like the best time of the day. But, in teenagers, like that transitioning actually into that bed and sleep time can be quite difficult. Caffeine has an impact on our sleep as well. So, things like fizzy pop and coffee and tea and that kind of thing can directly impact on our sleep. And it doesn't always prevent you from falling to sleep. Sometimes it can really impact on the quality of the sleep through the night as well. And then alcohol and drugs also have an impact on sleep. What do teens want to know? So what are the messages that we can be conveying to our teens? So when we look at sleep, it's kind of one of the things that I think for a lot of people is the one thing that we will forego, right? And so, stay up late to do a piece of work, or and sleep will be the thing that we kind of disregard and dismiss over other things. But actually, when you look at basic human needs, sleep is up there with food and water. And actually, you can survive longer without food than you can without sleep. So it really is up there as one of the things that we absolutely need. We're spending approximately a third of our lives asleep, but that can differ from person to person. So not every person is going to need to spend a third of their life asleep. It varies from person to person. And if we don't have enough sleep, it has a really significant impact on our physical health and our mental health. So I'm going to talk to you about sleep stages now, and how kind of sleep works and what happens in the different sleep stages. So when we first are in bed, but we're ready to go to sleep. So our eyes are closed. We're in that kind of place where we're ready to drift off. We drop down into our stage 1 sleep. This is very, very light sleep. You can be very easily woken during this stage of sleep. And often we do spike back up into a wakefulness. So if you've ever had it where you're kind of just drifting off to sleep and you jerk, right? Or you feel like you're falling off the bed, that's perfectly normal. It's a perfectly normal stage of sleep. Now, after that first spike, that's when we then head into our deep sleep cycle. So the deep sleep occurs predominantly in the first 3.5 to 4 hours of sleep. But as you can see, we are in and out of deep sleep. So it's not, you don't get a consistent 3.5, 4 hours of deep sleep. The deep sleep is the most restorative of all of the sleep, right? So the body will absolutely protect that sleep at all costs. So most people, there's very few people that I've worked with that haven't had that first chunk of deep sleep, because the body will protect it. This looks after our vital functions, right? So our physicality, so, growth hormones are released, in teenagers particularly, this is happening. And our physical, extremities, internal organs are looked after during this first part of sleep. Then we head into our second part of sleep, which arguably is more important when we're talking about sleep, in terms of this is where the work's going to go in. This is the sleep that's going to be missed off mostly. So the second part of our sleep is the REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement dream sleep. Now, during the REM sleep is where our mental health is looked after. Our emotions are being processed, memories are being consolidated and filed away, and all of the kind of toxins are removed from our brain. Now, when anybody is having less sleep than they need, it's the REM that takes the hit. Hence why you end up with this sleep deprivation, the symptoms of sleep deprivation, because you haven't had enough REM sleep. So those processes, that mental health, that emotional well-being has not been looked after properly, which means that you can't be your best self the next day. Now, the other thing to say about REM sleep as well, again, just as a side note, is when we're in our rapid eye movement sleep, our bodies are paralyzed. So the only part of our body that works is our eyes, and they're moving rapidly. So if anyone has ever suffered from sleep paralysis, this is kind of a blip between the body being in the REM sleep cycle and the brain being in the wakefulness cycle. So this is where I'm coming to next. So on this hypnogram, you can see that there's spikes the whole way through the sleep, less in the first part, more in the second part. Now, these are partial awakenings. So every human being on the planet will wake up in the night several times. Often we don't remember waking up. It just happens. We wake up, we check our environment. Has anything changed? It's like an inbuilt safety mechanism within us. So, years ago, if we were being hunted by lions and bears, we'd wake up. Is there a bear? No, it's all right. I can go back to sleep again, while the young ones were guarding while we were having our deep sleep. So we will wake up, subconsciously check if everything's okay, go back to sleep again. Now, different people have different sensitivities in terms of what can disturb their sleep. And I'm sure you will have had conversations with people at some point around, oh yeah, that wakes me up. Oh no, it doesn't wake me up. I could sleep through a thunderstorm, and that kind of thing, because we're all different. We all have different sensitivities, but it's worth being aware of that if, you know, your teenager is waking up during the night several times, can't get back to sleep, and I've got some strategies and tips for that, can't get back to sleep, looking first at environment, because what you're going to be checking for is what was happening when I first fell asleep. So you want your environment to be exactly the same the whole way through the night. It's like when you go on holiday, in the first couple of days that you're there, you kind of wake up, where am I? Remember you're on holiday, and go back to sleep again, because your environment's changed. So I've already spoken through this one. So melatonin, I'll talk a little bit about melatonin. So it's a naturally occurring hormone. It's produced in the pineal gland, which is like located right in the center of the brain. It controls our circadian clock, which is what establishes our sleep-wake cycles. And our levels of melatonin will increase when we first go to sleep. And then as we go through the night, they'll decrease. So into the early hours, they will be a lot lower. Now, some people are administered medication, which is an unlicensed medication here in the UK, not in other places, but that can produce shifts in circadian rhythms. Now, light is a real common sleep robber. So daylight and artificial lighting in the evening can have a huge impact on our melatonin levels, because it kind of tricks the brain that it's not nighttime, that nighttime isn't approaching. So creating like a darker environment coming into the evening can be really helpful in terms of helping that natural production of melatonin. So how do we help teenagers to sleep? What do we do? What are the practical strategies that we can try? So think about diet and caffeine. Okay, so what are they eating? Are they having any caffeine? Are they having any sugary snacks, you know, coming up towards the end of the day? Are their eating times regular as well? Are they regulated throughout the day? So are they eating at the same time each day? And really thinking about that, because that often can be an issue when it comes to sleep. How much exercise are they doing during the day? How much movement are they getting? Because sometimes it's not about like doing an hour's exercise class, but how much movement are they getting throughout the day? And actually, to help to fall asleep in the evening, focusing like movement and exercise in the morning can really help with that. Whereas if somebody's struggling to stay asleep through the night, exercise in the afternoon typically will help with that. Now, winding down before bed, I would say just an hour max, right? Even half an hour. But really think about and ask your teenager, what are the things that help you to relax, things that you enjoy, and make it really specific to them, because, you know, reading a book for one person is going to be phenomenal, right? Really, really relaxing. But for another person, that might be really stressful or might be really exciting. So really looking at different things that they perhaps do during the daytime that they could then move into the nighttime, even like listening to audiobooks or listening to a podcast or some chilled music, or, you know, doing a bit of colouring, you know, like the mandala colouring books, like those kinds of things, that you're doing something, but you're actively relaxing your body. And also like things like a body scan can be really good. You can get loads of guided body scans on YouTube that you can use, 10-15 minutes, that you know go through all the different parts, relaxing each part of the body. Having a set bedtime, and when we're looking at set bedtimes for teens, looking at where their sleep is in the here and now. Okay, so if they're not falling to sleep until, say, midnight, right, set the bedtime initially at midnight. Keep the wake up time the same most days. I always say if they're really like reluctant to wake up at like obviously 7 o'clock or whatever on the weekend, free them up on the Saturday. Let them have a bit of a lay-in on the Saturday, but then on the Sunday, pull it back to a bit earlier again, because it's going to be really hard to fall asleep if they've laid in for longer on a Sunday morning, because they won't have had enough hours throughout the day to be able to be sleepy enough to go to sleep. So setting the bedtime where they are, keeping the wake up the same, and anchoring in the wake up time is one of the most crucial things that you can do, anyone can do for their sleep. Anchor in that wake up time, and then see what naturally happens with the sleep, and it will naturally start to adjust when you anchor in a morning wake up time. Having a wake up routine as well, that includes bright lights or natural daylight. And we are heading into spring, summer now, so we have got a bit of natural daylight. But in the autumn, winter, there's very few products that I would recommend for sleep. One thing I do recommend, however, is an SAD lamp or a daylight lamp, because that synthetically gives you natural daylight. When we bring in natural daylight in the morning, as close to waking up as possible, this suppresses the sleep hormone melatonin, kickstarts the daytime hormones, which will really help to feel more energized in the daytime, but will also help with being able to go to sleep at nighttime as well. So if you focus on the morning time, you're going to get much better results than if you try and fix on a bedtime. Reducing screen time overall, but like I say, I would be looking at things like social media time. If they're watching a film that they've watched 100 times before, that is less likely to have an impact on their sleep than if they're sitting watching a screen. So, you know, a TV that's 10 feet away is going to have much less of an impact than a tiny little phone that's kind of glued to their eyes. So look at how you can reduce screen time and speak to them about it. See what they're happy with as well. Because there's always a bargain to be had. You know, like my daughter listens to sleep stories to go to sleep at nighttime. So she isn't on her screen, but she'll have it on. So I don't take the phone away from her. And obviously she knows the importance of sleep because of the work that I do. But when you've got those really open kind of communication lines, it can be really, really helpful in terms of like striking a balance. So stress has a huge impact on sleep overall. And I'm pulling in here some of my, so I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist specifically for insomnia. So I'm pulling in some of those kind of skills for you guys. And this is something that I use with almost all of my clients, certainly from probably about 13 upwards, but you can do them younger. So when you finish your day, and I would say doing this kind of at the end of the school day or earlier in the evening, not too close to bedtime, because we don't want to be inducing any stress. So if they've got a lot on, right? So if there's a lot going on, thinking about, right, what do I need to do tomorrow? Because sometimes when you're feeling really overwhelmed, it's hard to see the woods for the trees. So actually really focusing on what needs to be done tomorrow and how are you going to do it? How can you make tomorrow feel that bit easier? So what are the things that you could do maybe with them, you know, getting their drink ready for school, making sure their school bag's done and their school uniforms out, just to make that morning feel a bit easier, take a little bit of pressure off. And then the third one, which nobody ever really does, or nobody that I speak to ever does, nobody said, oh yeah, I do that every day, is actually thinking about, right, what have I achieved and what have I accomplished today? So what this can do is kind of leave you with a sense of, yeah, actually, today was all right. I did all right. And, you know, I did really great in my English lesson, and the teacher gave me, you know, really positive feedback, or I loved sport today, whatever sport you were playing, but really looking at those achievements and those accomplishments in each and every day, which helps to kind of tie the day off with a nice little neat bow. Now, also, constructive worry time, and I call this a brain dump often. So like with a pen and paper, and I would say, you know, maybe let them do this themselves, right? Not something that you need to do. So this might just be something you can talk about. Pen and paper, and literally just writing down everything that's in the brain. What are the things that are worrying? And there's so much, you know, that teenagers worry about, and you know, can range from friendships through to education, through to outside of school, through to parents, all of that stuff, you know, that just stays up in the brain. And this is the stuff that can have a huge impact on sleep, because if you're worried about something and you've kept it in your brain, what the brain will do is it will go, oh, you haven't done anything about that, so it will loop it round again and bring it to the forefront. Remember this that you worried about, because you haven't done anything with it. And then it will loop around and do the same again, which is fine if you've got 2 or 3 worries. However, if you've got 20 or 30 worries that are looping around, it makes the brain like a waltzer, and that isn't a good place to be in to then be able to go to sleep. So having some time to really offload, and I often call it like a parking space, right, for your thoughts. So where you can just get all your thoughts down, leave it on a parking space. This might be a nice way as well of edging into, perhaps from time to time, like these communications. So, you know, they might want to share it with a parent and say, but not want to have the conversation about what they're worried about, but actually the written version in a couple of days afterwards, like handing it over. So it might give you a little bit of insight as well into the things that they're worried about, because it's not always what you think it's going to be. The bedroom environment itself. So looking at zoning, sleeping and working areas wherever possible, right? Because it isn't always possible in one room, but trying to avoid working from bed, you know, wherever possible. So even if it's just a chair or something in the bedroom, because we want to keep really positive associations with the bed itself. Think about covering over, you know, the desk or laptop or computer, books, whatever, you know, the school stuff, like covering it so you can't see it, because again, that can really induce stress. Find a way to separate studying time from social time. So having like a cutoff point, particularly I think from studying time, having a time of the day where it ends, so that you can then go into doing something a little bit lighter, then go into relaxing. Because if you're going from study, then trying to relax, it's really hard to do that, because the brain is so fired up and busy, and then you're like, right, now relax and go to sleep. That's really difficult. It's a really difficult thing to do. So really kind of helping them to taper down the evening. Now, these are strategies that can be used to help with if your teen is laying in bed, right, perhaps thinking about things, perhaps not ready to go to sleep. So they've had this shift, okay, in their body clock, and they're not ready to go to sleep. And they don't know there's nothing to do with that time, or they don't know what to do with that time. And this again can also help in the middle of the night. So if, you know, they're waking up in the night, really finding it difficult to be able to fall back to sleep at night. So maybe the brain kicks in, start thinking about things. The added complexity that we have at night time when we should be sleeping, so either right before going to bed or in the middle of the night, is that parts of our brain are downgraded. So the part that plays the biggest role is the prefrontal cortex, and that's kind of responsible for rationalizing, problem solving, reasoning. That is switched off, which means that any kind of thoughts that we have, and I'm sure everybody will be able to relate to this in some way, shape or form, any thoughts that we have, we can catastrophize those quite easily, because that part of the brain isn't there going, soothing you, saying, oh, it's all right, you know, we don't need to panic about this, it's all fine. So because that isn't working, the brain can go out and can really make a massive job of something that seemingly isn't that concerning. Like you wake up in the morning and think, why on earth was I thinking that? But it's just because the prefrontal cortex isn't working properly. So again, speaking to your teens about this. So there's a specific breathing technique that was developed by a professor called Dr. Andrew Weil, and specifically designed for insomnia. Now you do 5 rounds of this, not anymore, and you breathe into the count of 4, hold for the count of 7, and breathe out for the count of 8. And what this will do, if you're kind of in that fight, flight, freeze mode, if you're in that catastrophizing mode, what this does is it really helps to calm down that central nervous system. So from a physiological viewpoint, it makes your body much calmer. Another thing that you can try is focusing on keeping your eyes open, which sounds counterintuitive, right? Because you want to be closing your eyes to go to sleep. But actually, when you focus on keeping your eyes open and keep saying, keep your eyes open, keep your eyes open, keep your eyes open, sleep will come more easily. It will come more quickly. Now, these three next things are my favorites, if I'm honest. These are the ones that I use mostly. This is the stuff that works. And it kind of gives you a tangible action that you can take, again, to fall asleep or to remain asleep. So counting backwards from 1,000 in sevens sounds horrific, right? But it really works. The next one, I'll explain why they work in a minute. The next one is playing a pictorial game with yourself. So let's say, for talking's sake, you close your eyes and you think about a butterfly, and you really intensely focus and think about this butterfly, the colours, the body, the antennae, the wings, what colours are the wings. You get to the end of it, you've really, really thought about it. You've got this orange and red butterfly, right? Then you switch it up and you go, oh, what would a blue and yellow butterfly look like? And then really intensely think about that. And you can use any object of reference that you want, anything at all. So it could be an animal, car, whatever you want, any object of reference. But you think about it in detail, and then you mix it up and you think about it in the next like abstract form. And then A to Z list. So this can be countries, places, girls' names, boys' names, anything you want, foods, and you just go through the alphabet from A to Z. Now, how these three strategies work, and depending on you, and you personally, will depend on which ones work for you and how many of them work for you. Some people all three, some people just one. It really is variable from person to person. But what they do is when we can't get to sleep, or when we wake up and then we start thinking, right? So our brain switches on, we start thinking, we haven't got this prefrontal cortex working. So we start really catastrophizing. What then happens in the body is we get a spike of cortisol. Now, cortisol, the hormone, is way stronger than melatonin. So when we get this spike of cortisol, particularly as we're coming towards the end of a sleep where the melatonin levels are really starting to drop off and deplete, the cortisol spikes, which then can keep us awake for long periods of time or make us unable to go to sleep. When we do these activities, it's like we almost slot it in before we can get that cortisol rise. So we pop that in, which prevents us from thinking about those stressful thoughts, because we have to think about these things. They're quite difficult to do. The brain knows, I don't need this information. It's completely neutral, right? It bears no relevance on my life whatsoever. So it allows the melatonin, it allows the brain to kick back in and then help you to fall back to sleep more easily or fall to sleep more easily. So they're really, really useful strategies. So hopefully you've made a note of those. So what do we do if we wake up in the middle of the night? What can we advise our teens to do? So going back to that hypnogram and looking at those wake-ups, partial awakenings are absolutely normal, right? So if you're waking up for a couple of minutes, go back to sleep fairly easily, it is nothing at all to worry about. And I do have people that will come to me just with this, and they're like, I'm waking up 3 times every night. I don't know why. I just want to be able to sleep through the night. And actually, it's just about whether you remember waking up or not. So it's nothing at all to be worried about. If it's under 15 minutes, most people, it's only a few minutes. So don't panic about that. Rest assured with that. Now, if they wake up and they know they're not going to be able to go back to sleep with ease, so you've tried the methods, okay, you've done the counting backwards, you've used a pictorial game, you've done a bit of the breathing, you've tried keeping your eyes open, but it's not working, right? So you're not able to go back to sleep. After about 15-ish minutes, I mean, you're not going to time it, but when you're at that point where like, I've tried all this, it's just not working, I can't get back to sleep, go into another room. So advise them to either go into another room or get up out of bed and sit in a chair. What we don't want to be doing is any work. We don't want to be using any excessive screens, so scrolling social media. Definitely don't want to be doing exercise or disturbing other people, because this will give it a purpose. It will give the wake up a purpose, and we want to not give the wake up a purpose. So get up out of bed, because we don't want to create negative associations with bed. We don't want to create this, oh, well, I go to bed and I lay here for 2 hours, not being able to go to sleep, and building that anxiety and getting really stressed about it. Because then when you get into bed the next day, the brain's like, oh, this is where we lay and worry for 2 hours. So getting up out of bed and doing something that's, again, quite neutral, right? So it might be reading a book, it might be listening to a podcast, it might be listening to some music, something that you find quite relaxing, colouring, you know, that kind of thing, something that you find quite relaxing but not too taxing, and that's not going to wake you up. And then get back into bed when you feel sleepy, and the sleep will definitely come sooner, and then still anchor in that morning wake up time. So the key to everything, the key to sleep really, is keeping the wake up time super consistent with the bright lights. That will help everything else it has like a domino effect. Everything else will fall into place when you keep the morning wake up time really, really consistent. Now, finding mornings difficult, which is a real common theme for teenagers. Like I've said, daylight exposure, just 4 minutes of natural daylight or an SAD lamp is going to suppress that sleep hormone. It really, really starts to prepare our bodies for sleep the next day. So when we wake up in the morning at that time, we suppress the melatonin, kickstarts our cortisol, which is how we all kind of start the day. We get a little bit of our stress hormone to get us going. And then what happens is our bodies start to build sleep pressure. So sleep pressure, or sleep drive, it's known as well, builds and builds and builds and builds and builds throughout the day. It hits its peak, which helps us to go to sleep and helps us to remain asleep. What I often say to people is, when you're thinking about sleep, or when you're thinking about your teen sleep, rather than thinking about, right, what time do they need to go to bed so they can get enough hours of sleep, think about it in terms of how many hours do they need to be awake to be able to fall asleep fairly easily. Because when you flip it like that, and for most people it's going to be 16-ish, 15, 16 hours. And when you think about it from that perspective, sleep becomes a lot easier when you're thinking about actually how long do you need to be awake rather than how long do you need to be asleep, because we cannot force ourselves to go to sleep. Nobody can force themselves to go to sleep. So anchor in the wake up day time, 7 days a week, wherever possible. If you've got a team that's really resistant to that, then Saturday morning, let them have a bit of a lay-in, because if they don't get much sleep, say from a Saturday to a Sunday, you pull the time back on the Sunday morning, keep it in line with like a school day, maybe an hour difference, but that will then help them to be able to fall asleep on the Sunday night, because they've built enough sleep pressure to be able to do that. So still can't sleep? Relaxation exercises, any type of mindfulness, which I'm sure, you know, people are talking about all of the time. Diffusion of thoughts as well. So using that brain dump, having that kind of place where you can put everything down. Clock watching is a really big thing. So, you know, particularly if you can't get sleep and you're really trying to get to sleep, and then you look at the clock and think, oh no, it's been another half an hour. That means, and we'll start to calculate down, how many hours have I got left before I get up? I'm going to feel terrible tomorrow. And all of these thoughts start to race. So if sleep is difficult, avoid clocks in bedrooms and things, because it really, really will exacerbate the sleep issues. I always say to people, you've survived 100% of the days that you haven't slept well. So it's not going to make any difference if you know what time it is and how many hours sleep you've had overall, because you've survived 100%, but now you've got a way to make it work for you, make it better for you, and get up. You can't force yourself to sleep. So avoiding, you know, that typical go to bed earlier if you can't sleep. Actually wait until you're sleepy. If you can wait until you're sleepy, that's going to really help you to be able to fall asleep more easily and start creating those real positive associations with sleep. So how should we be conveying sleep messages? So really looking at what motivates a young person as well. So especially when we're looking at that kind, you know, we're looking at those sleep cycles. So the deep sleep, the REM sleep, like, are they really into sports? You know, we know that if you sleep better, physically your body is going to be in better shape, right? You're going to feel better about yourself. You're going to have more energy. So really using those motivations to promote this positivity around sleep. How can sleep support their interests, and what are their interests, and really like narrowing it down to them, and what are their sleep goals as well, because that's really important, that, you know, coming from a place of what they actually want for their sleep overall, and what makes them feel good, you know, because it might be that 7.5 hours is enough sleep, and that's okay if they're feeling good the next day. So really looking at what they would like to achieve from their sleep consistently as well, which is great that, you know, Forest are doing this, because then, you know, the staff will be conveying the same messages as the parents, and that's what young people need, is to hear the same thing coming from everybody. Yeah, it's really important. Okay, so we're on to the Teen Sleep Hub. So this is available for you to go and access at any time that you want to, or your teens to go and access. There's been 33,000 downloads on here. There's 1,610 subscribers, but I'm sure there'll be more. 18,000 site visitors and 19,000 video views. So please do kind of signpost your teens to this, because there's loads of great resource on there for them to be able to access. And that's the end of the presentation. I hope that was okay. But if you want to get in touch with anybody, there's the email support at thesleepcharity.org.uk, Teen Sleep Hub, for you to access any of the resources that are on there, and then the Sleep Charity website as well. Thank you all for being here.